Hill is Mine, Maurice Walsh, Chapter 5. Stephen and Rory went up Glen Chinook with a packet of sandwiches. 12 winding miles of glen before it lifts over a brae to splay out into the moors of Avonside. The Letic water wound its way down the hollow. The strath carried a felt of sound herbage, but was not a quarter grazed except in its lower reaches. The wiry brown seed heads stood out on the yellowing grass, and a good crop of hay could be cut anywhere. In many places the heather was already encroaching on the grass, and there were traces of rabbit everywhere. All up the glen there were ruined walls. Somewhere in clusters it had once been walls of human dwellings. Within living memory, that glen and scores of glens like it had bred a race not excelled by any race in Europe. A race with a very ancient culture that had lived adequately, spiritually and materially. Now that breed was scattered on the face of the earth, with Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the States richer for the scattering, and the domain of the clans was a sheep run, a rabbit warren, a grouse moor, a deer forest, a preserved recreation ground for wealthy Southlanders and foreigners. This glen, where music had been played and stories told and love made and claymores drawn, was empty between stern walls and under staring sky. There might be a shepherd with his dogs, a keeper, a gillie, a forester, but there were no women voices and no children. There were scattered sheep and crouching coney, black grouse and hooded crows, red deer and peregrine falcon, and a golden eagle hanging high in the air above all. But the water still ran, and the free air blew, and the land waited. Perhaps when the civilization that had gathered men into cities and evolved wars for its own destruction had vanished off the earth, the old civilization might rise again in the glens. Such was the hope of men like Rory Farquhar and Kenny Alpin. The Hill is Mine, Maurice Walsh. I'll start the review with a small anecdote. I've read Maurice Walsh before. I've read And No Quarter. It was a book I found in a charity shop about 4 years ago. I loved it so dearly that I read it around 4 times. It's the only book I've ever read 4 times, and you have to be a special book for me to read it even twice, so to read it 4 times you can get the impression that I liked it a lot. More so, my finding of it in the charity shop and my eventual love of it made me seem like if I was ever to read more Maurice Walsh, which I would dearly like to, perhaps I'll scour the shelves, and I won't go online to get it, but I'll look dearly in bookshops everywhere and try and find more. Cut to 4 years later, haven't found them yet. Until, of all places, New Zealand. I'm looking not in a charity shop, in a charity shop's bins outside. I move aside the dictionary. Who do I see looking up at me? Maurice Walsh. My heart leapt. I read it immediately, and I was reminded dearly of why I love Maurice Walsh so much. Maurice Walsh may have cemented himself in only 2 books as, in my mind, one of the greatest writers of my experience. He writes so keenly of the Scottish landscape and of Scottish culture in such a beautifully poetic prose that you really find yourself in the authentic Scotland when you read them. That's his setting. But his plot is a very intricate weaving of our Scottish and Irish characters' sense of mischief and play and scheming. And in that sense, with the mixture of the endowment of landscape and mischief, Maurice Walsh, I think, is to Scotland and Ireland what Mark Twain might be regarded as to the Americans. Apart from the fact that Mark Twain is a household name, and I don't know anybody else who's read Maurice Walsh. To the pity, because this writing is incredible. It twisted my heart in times. I had myself laughing. The jokes in the dialogue are funny and clever. The cleverness, I think, is probably what I enjoy most about Maurice Walsh's writing. Is there seems to be a deep, clever playfulness about what the characters are up to in this book. And it's just so enjoyable to read. I'm so glad I found this book. And I would recommend anybody who's interested in Scottish culture to read it. And I'll tell you now, without giving anything away, it's not all fun and games in Scotland. As Maurice Walsh points out, beneath the beauty of the soil of the Highlands is seeded but not rooted a sadness. No, sorry, I'll turn that around. Is rooted but not seeded a sadness, a tragedy that it permeates the fauna. And all of the jovialness of the characters within it it's sad, because as he reminds you, it's a culture on its way out under replacement. The Hill is Mine, Maurice Walsh. I won't wait until I find the next one on a bookshelf in 4 years' time. I intend to buy his whole collection and read it promptly. 4.5 out of 5.